Good day, everybody. Don't mind me. I'm just getting all my ducks in a row. Well, now what am I gonna do with my time? Maybe I should do a little recounting. Let's see. I have Mario 1. Then we have Mario The Lost Levels. I don't own it physically, so I'm gonna do what I do best. Pretend. Then I have Mario 2. And now for the fourth game in the series, Mario 3. What? That doesn't make any sense. How can Mario 3 be the fourth game? That breaks math. Everybody knows how numbers work. Watch. All right, we got 1, 2, and then 3. Oh, what the fuck? Super Mario Bros. 3. I don't really have a unique introduction for this game.
I just want to clarify, that's not a knock against this game, far from it. It's just, much like the first game, Mario 3 is one of the most influential games in existence. So much so to the point where I'm actually a little nervous to talk about it because there are so many reviews of Mario 3 out there, whether it's, actual, video essays, talk about the history and stuff, or just comedic laugh fests. And that made me wonder, what the hell could I add to the discussion? Really nothing, if I'm being honest.
Mario 3's influence goes way beyond when it first came out. Every opportunity given, Nintendo will find some way to pull inspiration from this game. Whether it's fun nods like Galaxy using Mario 3's athletic theme, to not so subtle moves by taking power-ups from this game and using them in other ones.
The practice of those games are more of a topic for another day, but it does add to my concern in talking about Mario 3 because this is a very saturated entity in the world of video games. But then I figured, it's not worth getting that held up over because there's still a lot to talk about in Mario 3, both as a game in and of itself, and also its history, which was weirdly complicated in the West.
To give some context, Mario 3 was released in Japan in 1988, and it wouldn't be released in North America until 1990, and Europe wouldn't get it until August of 91. Geez, what did the British do to piss you off? Well, what did America do to piss you off? I should really stop asking questions. There's no clear answer as to why it took so long to come over to the West. I mean, I doubt it took that long to localize it since there's not a lot of text in this game that would have needed to be changed. My best guess is since Mario 2 had just released in the US in '88, they probably wanted to give it more time to sell over here. Releasing two games in the same series a few months apart does nothing but undercut the sales. Good thing Mario never does that. Okay, either I'm stupid or the universe has a very funny sense of humor. We may probably never know why it took so long to come over here. Everything I've researched has more or less been sheer speculation. Again, the sales figures they would have gotten from releasing it the same year as Mario 2 is probably the most likely reason. Or it could be simpler than that. Maybe they just threw it straight from the shores of Japan.
Well, that should land in about 2 years.
Given the extra time it would take for Mario 3 to release, it sure made way for one hell of an ad campaign. Commercials for the game got a lot more elaborate compared to the first game in Mario 2. A lot of McDonald's ads I've noticed. Makes sense. I mean, if you wanted to sell any product in the 80s and 90s, you would probably find a Happy Meal tie-in somewhere. But the one thing that's brought up at some point whenever this game is being discussed is the 1989 movie The Wizard. I've never seen this movie, and I really don't have any desire to do so. Outside of some hilariously unsubtle product placement by Nintendo, which there is a lot of in that movie, it looks like a really boring family film. The only reason The Wizard has any kind of significance now is that the ending of the film featured a tournament between the main characters that officially introduced Super Mario Bros. 3 to the US. I'll give it this, that is one hell of a way to generate hype for the game. I can imagine kids were losing it in the theaters while this scene was going on. Come a few months later, and the game would hit store shelves in February of 1990.
I want you to keep that in mind because by 1990, we were already kind of into the next generation of video game consoles. I mean, the Genesis was out for a whole year worldwide, and a few months later, the Super Nintendo would come out in Japan. I bring this up because a common complaint this game received by critics when it came out was that it was on the NES to begin with, when there were consoles with better graphics out around that time. Which is really a stupid complaint to make. It's not the game's fault the graphics aren't better, it's just using the hardware it was given. I chalk it up to it being a different time and people generally not knowing how to review video games because that practice has gotten so much more sophisticated. Ah! Yeah! Alright! I hate the law!
Oh, Jesus! You will play this until it breaks
The thing I find impressive though is that despite those complaints, Mario 3 still sold 17 million copies. I think that makes it the third best-selling game on the system behind the first game and Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt is the second best-selling game, and I think it's only because of this combo cartridge. This is why you should always check for leeches.
God damn it!
Those numbers are still really impressive since I don't think Mario 3 ever became a pack-in game for the NES. And those numbers aren't even counting the re-releases for All-Stars or the Game Boy Advance.
That reminds me, I'm gonna be showing stuff from all the versions of Mario 3 in this video because it's really not worth going into that much detail about all the differences each of them have. With exception to one, but I'll get into that in a little bit.
By and large, regardless of what version you play, you're likely going to get the same experience from each of them. It really depends if you want a more authentic experience or if you want one with better graphics and sound. The Game Boy Advance version is really interesting since it's sort of being treated as a sequel to the remake of Mario 2, and for this remake of Super Mario Bros. 3, they called it Super Mario Advance 4.
Everything I know is a lie!
When did this happen? I feel like after a while you should just stop putting so many subtitles and numbers into it. Even though both titles are accurate, this is the weirdest tongue twister of a name I've ever seen. Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3. Yeah, just like how I'm a second child born first. So in a fun little change, Mario 3's story is actually a little more dynamic than the first games. Instead of Peach getting captured, Bowser is waging war on the neighboring kingdoms trying to claim their power.
War is no laughing matter. Especially when it's being waged by a turtle.
Mario and Luigi are tasked with saving the rulers of each kingdom by retrieving a magic scepter that's transformed them into different creatures, with each kingdom having been taken over by the 7 Koopalings. Dude, Bowser? Fox, he's got 7 kids. I know Nintendo has since retconned this and said they're not his kids, but come on, look at Bowser. Tell me you wouldn't. Once we've defeated all the Koopalings, we find out that Bowser has kidnapped Peach while we were busy, thus leading us to his kingdom. I'll give it this, that is a fun surprise when it happens, since after each world, Peach does send us a letter of encouragement, and then the last one from Bowser is going, yo, she's mine. Good for him it's not Peach from the movie. But you know how it goes, we beat Bowser and save Peach, with a fun little self-aware joke at the end, which I appreciate. I love how we're only 3 games in and they're already making fun of how Peach gets kidnapped. The story isn't important here, but I appreciate it tries to be a little more dynamic than the first game. It's certainly more expressive. I love seeing the different looks of each of the kings you save, and also how they look when updated in the All-Stars version. It takes the simple idea of the first game and refines it nicely. And I think refined is probably the best word to use when describing this game because man, this game is so good. Yeah, I don't feel like beating around the bush. Mario 3 is so damn fun from beginning to end. Especially after playing Mario 2 and not feeling too much of an evolution, this game takes everything about the last 2 games and improves upon it. Let's start with the biggest one. Mario can once again kill enemies by jumping on them. Oh, thank God I was running out of my dosage. Ow! The control in general just feels way better. The stiffness of the first game is gone, and the rigid stop and go feel from 2 is not a thing anymore. Mario now has way more momentum behind his movement. The longer you run before you jump, the further your jump will go. You got more control in the air, so if you need to correct yourself, you can do so. Granted, you could do this in the other games too, but the floatier jumps makes it feel like I have way better control over Mario's movements. This alone would have already been a great enough reason to get this game, but the levels, oh my god, they are so much more interesting. I've gone on previously about how the level design in the first couple of Mario games was never really its strong suit. Nothing terrible, mostly. But Mario 1, seriously try to remember the layout of any stage from that game. I don't think you can. I mean, sure, everyone knows how World 1-1 looks, but who's gonna be a World 6-3 specialist?
I mean, I was proud.
Mario 3 has so much more unique layouts by comparison. It's hard to describe it other than that. They are just fun levels to go through. It feels like speeding through them is pretty encouraged since your movement is way faster than earlier and a lot of the levels are pretty short. Some of them last roughly a minute or less, but I think that's a good thing since it can ease players into what they can expect. The addition of slopes really helps too since you can slide down them and kill almost everything in your path, which is pretty true to life. Very little can survive an Italian's ass. There's a lot of fun additional items to interact with that, once again, give these levels so much charm and makes them just, again, so much fun to play. You got these music blocks that bounce you, conveyor platforms to time your jump on, rising and lowering water, ice that can melt with your fire flowers. You can ride a shoe, been trying that for a while.
There!
It's just so cool to see how alive these levels feel, as Mario 3 was officially the first game in the series to have dedicated themes to each world. Technically, Mario 2 USA did do that, albeit very loosely, and it wasn't really a Mario game, so I know this aspect is kind of taken for granted nowadays, as there have been so many Mario games that use this specific level order. Hell, most games in general did this for a time. World 2 is a desert, World 3 is a beach, World 8 is hell. And yeah, I get it, it's a little difficult to look past that, but I think there's something that a lot of you need to remember. Yeah, how did I put it?
Time is a myth.
This was 1988, and I mean, when would there have been another game to do something like this? Sure, it started a trend, but that's not the game's fault. It being the innovator of something that became overdone, that just means it created something long-lasting. It's even more impressive since Mario 3 has 90 levels. That is insanity, and a far cry from the 30 or so levels from the first two games. You gotta remember that during this time, some games were rocking around 10 levels. Hell, Mega Man 2 came out the same year and had 14. I know it's not an apt comparison since these games didn't share similar budgets or manpower, despite Mario 3 only having a team of 11 people on it, but nonetheless, that should be commemorated. And in this game's defense, the way the worlds are designed goes beyond just the way they look, starting with just one screen to sprawling across different areas to explore. Yeah, World 1 is basically a grid, but World 2 uses the desert theme in its levels with sand tornadoes, quicksand, the sun. World 3 has Japan in it, I hope they have the fire ramen. World 4 is shaped like a turtle. That's just cool. It also has most people's favorite level gimmick, as some of the levels have big enemies and blocks. It looks cool, but functionally it doesn't really add anything too worthwhile. The bigger Koopas are actually easier to deal with since there's so much more of them to jump on. World 5 is probably my favorite incorporation of the sky as a world theme, with the first half taking place on the ground and the second take place up in the clouds. World 6, okay, I don't have much to say, but I'm a sucker for ice worlds in games. If you have any familiarity with this game, you've probably seen the jokes about World 7 being the weed world, and yeah, I can't debate that. I don't know if that was the intention, but it's certainly what's being shown. Even the music sounds like something you listen to while high. Before bed, Mario probably just went, whoa! Man! Ah, that's some good.
That's 2 drug jokes in 2 separate Mario reviews. I gotta note that down. I'm on a roll today.
World 8 is definitely the coolest with all this fire and darkness, although it does have some of my least favorite level types in the game. As much as I enjoy the level gimmicks, there are some that just never get better for me. This is the first game to introduce auto-scrolling, and it's not fun. It just feels like an arbitrary challenge added onto a level that honestly would have been more fun to play normally. Most of the airships are auto-scrollers, and they all consist of just dodging bullet bills and other projectiles coming your way. I know most people are quick to bring up the water levels as something that's annoying, and I don't find them to be that annoying personally, since the swimming controls work just fine. If anything, I find the levels with rising and lowering water to be more annoying, since it cuts your speed in half whenever you touch it, and more often than not you'll get...
Oh right, that reminds me. There's a lot of enemies in this game. Now replace the word game with world, and that's a very different statement.
There are 51 unique enemies in the game, which, I mean, how often can I sound impressed now? I think it's just cool that most of them are different. You have the returning Koopas that you can kick around, the Goombas, those freakish little chodes, but now we're introduced to a whole bunch of mainstays like Thwomps, Boo Ghosts, and Chain Chomps, which were actually made in reference to how Miyamoto was chased by a dog as a kid and it scared him. You know what? I can respect that, taking your fear and creating something that can defeat it. Hey man, I can relate.
Ah! Jeez! I am so fucking ready!
It is funny seeing some of the one-off enemies that are only in this game. Like you have Karimbo's Goomba, which is just a Goomba in a shoe.
There's a lot to unpack in that description.
You have the angry sun that chases you, and that's better than my angry son.
Look out, Dad!
No! Oh my god.
You got this weird-ass thing called Rotodisc? That sounds awesome. And what are these little guys? pile driver micro Goombas? Are they gonna give me the tombstone? And there is a cool aspect on the overworld where you can actually fight a pair of Hammer Brothers, and when you beat them, you get a power-up. And sometimes you can get a really rare one.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. There's a lot of power-ups in this game. I get reminded of things a lot.
Remember how I said that Mario 2 felt kind of boring after a while? Well, it wasn't until this game where I discovered the biggest factor of that. There were no power-ups. Like, at all. I mean, yeah, you had the mushroom for your health bar, and sometimes you would get a Starman, but other than that, yeah, there was nothing. So I imagine the whiplash going from that to Mario 3 must have been intense, because Mario 3 has one of the best selection of items in this series. I'm serious. Other games have gotten close, and Mario 3D World might be my favorite, but until then, it wasn't even a contest. There are so many fun and interesting power-ups to find in this game. You have the returning mushroom and fire flowers, but then we have the most iconic power-up in this game, the Super Leaf. This transforms you into Raccoon Mario, and I mean, that's just adorable. It's even on the front cover. That's hard to do. My last model attempt didn't end so well. You can use your tail to swing at enemies and break blocks, but the best feature is when you build up enough speed, you can fly for a few seconds and get some really good air on this. There's often a lot of goodies to find in the sky whenever the level gives you a leaf. It's also great since it lets you glide as well, so you can correct your jumps way easier. There's also the Tanuki suit that gives you the same abilities as a leaf, but now it makes you look like a furry. Boing! And it gives you the ability to turn into an indestructible statue. Good thing the floor is solid. There's also the frog suit, which, yeah, kind of sucks on land, but when you get underwater, oh my god, the swimming is so freaking nice with this thing. The Hammer Brothers suit, this is amazing. You get to throw hammers at enemies, and this destroys everything. Goombas, Chain Chomps, Thwomps, even Boo Ghosts. The best part is that Mario 3 introduces us to an inventory you can access across the overworld, where you can save items you collect from either the Hammer Bros or the Toad Houses. The Toad Houses give you these little mini games to solve, which are nothing crazy. You'll usually walk out with something, which is nice. But there are also some secret items you can find that affect the overworld. The hammer allows you to break certain blocks to find secret areas in a couple worlds. You have Karibo's shoe that lets you bounce on spikes and kill all enemies. It also makes you bounce a little bit while running. That's cool. I wish my shoe could do that. No. The magic whistle is easily the hardest one to find, but it allows you to skip certain worlds whenever you use it. I do love it uses the same sound as the warp whistle from Zelda. That's a cute reference. But seriously, some of these are really hard to find just because they're hidden in the most obscure of places. In World 1-3, you grab a Koopa shell, stand on this specific block and hold down, and a few seconds later you fall through the set. Walk to the end and there's the whistle. How the hell are you supposed to figure that out? I will say this one is a bit charming since it plays into the idea that Mario 3 is actually a stage play. Yeah, I think that's something people tend to forget about this game, but look at the details in the graphics. The title screen has curtains open up, the platforms are bolted into the backdrop, and they cast a shadow. Mario ends by running off stage. It wasn't until Shigeru Miyamoto confirmed in an interview that this actually was the intention. I mean, that's a really cool framework. You could totally tell me this was put on by the Ember Island players, and I believe it.
I just want to let you know that I'll always love you. Like a brother.
I've already mentioned the Koopalings, but they act as the dedicated boss fights for the end of each world. None of them are hard. It's the standard jump on them 3 times and you win kind of spiel. And they very lightly change between each other. You have Larry Koopa. Wait, f***ing Larry Koopa. That's such a strangely normal name for the series. Look out, everybody, it's Larry. Morton Koopa Jr. Who was Morton Koopa Sr., and was he this stacked? Wendy O. Koopa? What does the O stand for? It's Wendy Koopa. Iggy Koopa looks like Millhouse. Roy Koopa? I mean, he's our boy. Lemmy Koopa. Now this kid, he gets bullied. And who's this last one? Ludwig von Koopa?
Deutschland ist im Pierreich. Hubish.
The bosses aren't really this game's strong suit, but I'll give them this. They aren't poor Boom Boom. He's the mid-world boss you find in the castles, and this guy, bless his heart, he's trying, but man, this is not his profession. He's so easy to beat, it makes me wonder why have a boss at all. Maybe it's actually a way to give you a break after the castle stages, since this is the one aspect of the game I'm not a huge fan of. I don't mind the castles being here, but I don't really enjoy them that much either. A couple are okay, but there are some that just require too many steps in order to actually complete them. You have this one where you have to go through multiple doors just to figure out which one it is. Then you have this one where you have to use a peace switch in order to navigate a bunch of coins to find the correct door to get out. The fortress in World 8 is a mess. There are so many looping rooms with no clear way to get out, weirdly strict timing required to get through some doors, and tons, and I mean tons of blocks you have to destroy when you're Big Mario, which means if you get hit, you have to loop around, get another mushroom, and then try again. I can say without question, this is easily the worst level in the game. So much so that I flat out just gave up on my All-Stars run. I didn't care at this point. Mario 3 does have some moments of that happening, either because you have to think of something outside the box, or sometimes do something completely outside of reason. This one level in World 6 is infamous for that reason, as you have to have a raccoon leaf, grab a shell, and fly up to an opening in the ceiling while still holding the shell, and then throw it at these blocks to clear a path. Mind you, that's a lot easier said than done since you have to hold on to the B button in order to hold on to the shell, or else you'll just let it go, while also tapping the jump button so you can fly upwards. It's funny to me because that kind of stuff isn't in the final level at all, which you would expect to be the hardest level, but nah, it's actually pretty straightforward and easy, especially compared to the other castle level right before it. You can even phase through the walls. I've been trying that my whole life. This leads us to the final battle with Bowser, which is actually pretty fun, all things considered. It's pretty simple, just making him break blocks over a pit, but compared to the other bosses, I'd say it's the most fun and easily the best one in the game. Now, with all that under wraps, what else can I really say about Super Mario Bros. 3?
I know it's not a good game. It's a great...
The jump in quality is so stark and impressive here. Everything that was introduced in Mario 1 has been improved upon in this game. The controls are better, the level design is better, the enemies are more unique, it's a more expressive game, the music is a lot of fun, the power-ups are a lot of fun, the worlds are a lot of fun. This game is just a lot of fun, plain and simple. It sticks to its strengths while also trying to elevate the Mario formula. This created the standard and template for all Mario games going forward. Quite literally, every 2D Mario game from this point onward draws some sort of inspiration from Mario 3. Even some 3D games do that. And while yes, the reliance of what has been created here has been kind of a hindrance to some of these games, that's not Mario 3's fault. This was the next jump in quality that the series really deserved. There's a reason why it became as popular and as influential as it did. It's just solid. Which version do you play? I don't care, man. They're all good. NES, All-Stars, Advance, you're gonna have a good time. I'll say that Advance does actually have some really cool extra stuff on top of the existing remake. Yeah, the sound is a little rough and they still make the characters talk, but thankfully not nearly as much as before. But this version of Mario 3 has 72 additional levels. That's just crazy.
These weren't in the game upon its initial release. You actually had to buy the Game Boy Advance e-reader separately, and then also separately buy a deck of cards that apparently had the levels on them, swipe them, and then you could play them. Even for Nintendo, that's really dumb.
Thankfully, the re-releases of this game include all the levels right out the gate on both the Wii U and Switch Online apps. The levels are pretty cool, with some unique challenges that allow you to do things like pick up vegetables like in Mario 2. That's pretty sick. Maybe one day I'll sit down and beat all the extra levels, just like how I'll beat every game I own. Help.
But once again, you're gonna have a good time regardless of which version you play. They're all still Mario 3 at their core, which I think is all anyone could have asked for.
Not me. I wouldn't have asked for that.
Okay then. What would you have asked for?
My mortality.
Dude, Georgia's haunted as